It started with a whisper in a quiet police station. A little girl stood at the door, holding a leash, and said words no one was ready to hear. "My dog knows where the officer is." They didn't laugh, they didn't move. Because the officer she named hadn't come home. His radio went silent after midnight. His patrol car stopped moving near an old trail, and somehow no one noticed he was already missing. Then the dog did something strange. He didn't bark. He didn't search wildly. He sat directly in front of the officer's photo and looked like he was grieving someone already gone. A torn piece of uniform was found, then a broken badge, then 2 words carved into a tree, Hal PME. The officer standing with them swore he didn't remember writing it. Swore he wasn't hurt. Swore he was fine. But the dog knew better. The dog stopped at the edge of a ravine, too afraid to move forward. Tracks appeared where they shouldn't exist. Blood appeared that belonged to a man still standing. And beneath a bridge, inside dark tunnels, a truth waited, that the officer didn't disappear running from danger. He disappeared saving someone else. This isn't just a rescue story. It's about memory that vanished. A man who was lost while still alive. A child who believed when adults doubted. And a dog who refused to let his partner die alone. Because sometimes, survival doesn't begin with sirens. Sometimes it begins with a whisper. Tension hung thick in the air inside the cramped police station, the kind that wrapped around your throat and made every breath feel heavier. Officer Reed had been missing for 2 full days, and with each passing hour, hope seemed to drain a little more from the faces of his colleagues. The station, usually alive with routine chatter and the clatter of keyboards, had fallen into an uneasy silence broken only by the occasional crackle of dispatch radios and hushed, worried conversations. Search parties had been combing the surrounding areas since dawn on the first day, checking abandoned buildings, wooded trails, and roadside ditches. Every lead had turned cold, every tip had led nowhere. The other officers moved through the station like ghosts, their eyes hollow with fatigue and fear. Reed wasn't just a colleague, he was a friend, a mentor to some, a man who never left anyone behind. The thought that he might be out there, hurt or worse, gnawed at everyone. The chief paced his office, phone pressed to his ear, coordinating with neighboring departments. Maps covered the conference room walls, marked with red circles and crossed-out zones. Yet despite all the manpower and technology, not a single solid clue had emerged. It was as if Reed had simply vanished into thin air. Then, just as the morning briefing was about to begin, the station door swung open. A young girl stepped inside, no older than 12 or 13, her face flushed from the cold. She wore a worn jacket and muddy boots, and beside her walked a large German shepherd, its coat dusted with snow. The dog moved with purpose, ears alert, eyes scanning the room with an intensity that made several officers pause mid-step. The girl walked straight to the front desk, her voice steady despite the nervous tremor in her hands. "This dog can find Officer Reed," she said, her words clear and certain. "He used to be his partner." A ripple of surprise passed through the room. Officers exchanged glances, some skeptical, others leaning forward with sudden interest. The desk sergeant frowned, about to ask questions, but the chief emerged from his office, drawn by the commotion. He looked at the girl, then at the dog, whose tail had begun to wag slightly, as if recognizing the uniforms around him. "What's your name?" the chief asked gently, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Emily," she replied. "Reed trained this dog before he joined the force. My family took him in when Reed said he couldn't keep him anymore. But he never forgot Reed, and I think Reed needs him now." The room fell silent. The dog stepped forward, pressing his nose against the chief's hand, then turned toward the hallway where Reed's locker stood. His behavior was unmistakable, focused, determined, almost desperate. The chief's jaw tightened. He had seen search dogs work before, but this felt different. This wasn't just training. This was loyalty, memory, and an unbreakable bond that time hadn't erased. "All right," he said, standing tall. "Let's see what he can do." Emily reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped carefully in a clean cloth. She unfolded it slowly, revealing a jagged piece of metal that gleamed dully under the station's fluorescent lights. It was a fragment of Reed's badge, broken cleanly along one edge, the engraved numbers still partially visible. A murmur rippled through the gathered officers. Some leaned in closer, eyes widening with recognition. That badge had been Reed's pride, polished every week, worn every day without fail. Seeing it broken and separated from its owner sent a chill through the room. "I found this near the bridge outside town," Emily explained, her voice quiet but steady. "It was half buried in the dirt, like someone dropped it in a hurry." The chief took the fragment carefully, turning it over in his hands. His expression darkened. A badge didn't just fall off. It had to be torn away, broken in a struggle, or deliberately left behind as a sign. None of those possibilities brought comfort. Emily knelt beside the dog, holding the broken badge piece close to his nose. "Find him," she whispered softly, her fingers gently stroking the dog's ears. "Find Reed." The moment the dog caught the scent, everything changed. His entire body went rigid, muscles tensing beneath his thick coat. His ears shot forward, and his nose worked furiously, pulling in every molecule of air around the badge. A low whine escaped his throat, not of fear, but of recognition and urgency. He circled once, twice, then bolted toward the door, pulling against the leash Emily held tightly. She stumbled forward, barely keeping her grip. "He knows!" she shouted, excitement and fear mixing in her voice. "He knows where Reed is!" The officers scrambled into action. The chief barked orders, and within minutes a team was assembled. Vests were strapped on, radios clipped to belts, flashlights checked. The dog waited by the door, pacing impatiently, his eyes locked on the exit as if every second of delay was agony. One of the senior officers, a veteran named Martinez, crouched beside the dog and studied his behavior. "I've worked with search dogs for 15 years, he said quietly. "This isn't just tracking. This dog knows Reed personally. He's not following a scent trail, he's following someone he cares about." The chief nodded grimly. "Then we follow him. Everyone, move out." As they piled into patrol cars, Emily climbed into the lead vehicle with the dog, who pressed his nose against the window, breath fogging the glass. His tail wagged once, sharply, then stilled. His focus was absolute. The convoy rolled out of the station, sirens silent but lights flashing. The town blurred past as they headed toward the outskirts, toward the bridge Emily had mentioned. Inside the car, the dog shifted restlessly, whining softly, his eyes never leaving the road ahead. Everyone understood, without words, without doubt. Reed was alive, but he was in trouble, and time was running out. The convoy slowed as they reached the edge of town, where the paved streets gave way to gravel roads and the landscape opened into rolling fields bordered by dense woods. The bridge Emily had mentioned loomed ahead, an old steel structure that crossed a shallow ravine, its metal beams rusted and streaked with age. The moment the vehicle stopped, the dog leaped out, nearly pulling Emily off her feet. He didn't hesitate, didn't pause to sniff the air. He moved with purpose, heading straight toward the embankment beneath the bridge. Officers followed quickly, their boots crunching on frozen ground. The air was sharp and cold, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. As they descended the slope, Martinez called out, "Over here." He knelt beside a patch of disturbed soil, brushing away loose dirt and dead leaves. There, pressed deep into the mud, were boot prints, large and worn, the tread pattern unmistakable. "Those are Reed's," another officer confirmed, recognizing the standard issue boots they all wore. But it wasn't just the prints that made everyone stop. Alongside them, running parallel for several feet, were drag marks, deep grooves in the earth as if something, or someone, had been pulled or carried. The chief crouched, studying the scene with narrowed eyes. "These prints are deliberate," he said slowly. Reed was walking, not running. But the drag marks. He trailed off, his jaw tightening. One of the younger officers voiced what everyone was thinking. "Do you think he was injured?" Martinez shook his head, his expression grim. "Or he was helping someone else. Look at the spacing. The drag marks are too controlled, too even. If Reed was being dragged, there'd be more chaos. This looks like he was doing the dragging." The dog circled the area, nose low, moving back and forth between the boot prints and the drag marks. His whines grew sharper, more insistent. He pawed at the ground, then looked back at Emily, as if urging her to understand something he couldn't say. The chief straightened, scanning the area. If Reed was helping someone, where did they go? And why didn't he call for backup? Another officer pointed toward a narrow trail leading away from the bridge, disappearing into the woods. "There, the marks lead that way." The team regrouped, following the trail carefully. The boot prints continued, now joined by a second set, smaller and uneven, limping. The drag marks faded, replaced by scuff marks and broken branches. Whoever Reed had been with was struggling to walk. He found someone in trouble, Martinez said quietly. And he didn't leave them behind. That's Reed. But the further they walked, the more the signs became erratic. At one point, the boot prints stopped abruptly, circled back, then veered sharply to the left. It looked like Reed had been searching for something or trying to avoid something. The chief's radio crackled. "Any updates?" It was the station, anxious for news. "We've got signs of Reed," the chief replied. "Boot prints and evidence he was helping someone. But it's unclear if he's injured or trapped. Continuing search now." The dog suddenly stopped, his body going still. His ears flattened, and he let out a low, rumbling growl. Emily tightened her grip on the leash. "What is it, boy?" The officers froze, hands instinctively moving to their holsters. The trail ahead forked, one path leading deeper into the woods, the other descending sharply toward the base of the bridge where the old drainage tunnels began. The dog stared at the descending path, his growl fading into a soft whine. He didn't move forward. He didn't move back. He just stood there, trembling slightly, as if every instinct told him that whatever happened next, it happened down there. Martinez exchanged a glance with the chief. "The tunnels," he said quietly. "If Reed went down there, things could have gone bad fast. Those tunnels flood, collapse, and there's no cell signal." The chief nodded slowly, his face grim. "Either Reed is injured," he said, his voice steady but heavy, "or he got trapped while saving someone else." The dog barked once, sharp and commanding, then started down the path toward the tunnels. There was no hesitation now. Whatever fear he felt, loyalty was stronger, and the team followed, knowing that the answers they sought, and the officer they hoped to find, lay somewhere in the darkness below. The descent toward the tunnels was steep and treacherous, the ground slick with mud and patches of ice that crunched underfoot. Tree roots jutted out like gnarled fingers, and loose stones skittered down the slope with every step. The officers moved carefully, flashlights cutting through the growing shadows as the canopy above thickened. The dog led the way, his movements sure and focused, though his pace had slowed. Emily kept close behind him, her breath coming in short puffs of white mist. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, carrying with it the damp, earthy smell of underground water and decay. The mouth of the first tunnel came into view, a dark, gaping hole framed by crumbling concrete and rusted metal grates. Water trickled from somewhere within, echoing faintly in the silence. The dog approached the entrance, then stopped abruptly. His paws planted firmly in the dirt, and he refused to move forward. Emily tugged gently on the leash. "Come on, boy. We have to keep going." But the dog didn't budge. Instead, he began to pace in a tight circle, his nose pressed to the ground, sniffing furiously at one particular spot just outside the tunnel entrance. His whines grew louder, more frantic, and his tail dropped low. Martinez knelt beside him, shining his flashlight on the area. "He's found something." The beam of light revealed scuff marks in the dirt, fresh and chaotic, as if someone had struggled or been dragged to a sudden stop. There were heel marks, deep and sharp, like someone had dug their boots in trying to resist being pulled forward. And just beyond, barely visible in the dim light, were smears of something dark on the ground. The chief crouched, touching the substance carefully. His fingers came away stained. "Blood," he said quietly. "Not much, but it's fresh." A heavy silence settled over the group. The dog sat down, staring at the tunnel entrance, his body tense but unmoving. He barked once, short and sharp, then looked back at Emily, then at the officers, as if trying to communicate something urgent. "What is it?" Emily whispered, kneeling beside him. "What happened here?" Martinez stood, sweeping his flashlight across the tunnel entrance and the surrounding area. "This is where the trail changes," he said slowly. "The boot prints, the drag marks, they all lead here. But inside the tunnel there's nothing. No prints, no marks. It's like everything just stopped." Another officer checked the tunnel walls, noting the slick moss and standing water. "If Reed went in there, he would have left some trace. But it's too clean. Either he didn't go in, or someone covered the trail." The chief's jaw tightened. Or something went wrong right here, at this exact spot. The dog's behavior made it impossible to ignore. He wasn't afraid of the tunnel itself, he was reacting to what had happened just outside it. His instincts, honed through years of training and loyalty, were screaming a warning. Everything went wrong from here, Martinez said quietly, echoing the thought in everyone's mind. The team fanned out, searching the immediate area more thoroughly. One officer found a torn piece of fabric snagged on a jagged piece of metal near the tunnel entrance, dark blue, the same color as Reed's uniform. Another discovered a broken flashlight half buried in the mud, its lens cracked but still faintly glowing. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer, more troubling picture. Reed had been here, he'd been struggling, and whatever happened had forced him to stop at this exact spot. The chief spoke into his radio, his voice calm but urgent. "We need backup and technical support. Possible officer down near the old drainage tunnels. Prepare for a confined space search." As the team prepared to enter the tunnels, the dog finally moved. He stepped forward, just to the edge of the entrance, and barked again, louder this time, his eyes fixed on the darkness within. Then he stepped back, refusing to go further, his message unmistakable. Reed was beyond that point. But getting to him wouldn't be easy. The tunnel held secrets, danger, and perhaps the answers they desperately needed. And the dog, with all his training and instinct, understood what the humans were only beginning to realize. This wasn't just a rescue. This was a race against something much worse. The team entered the tunnel slowly, their flashlights cutting narrow beams through the suffocating darkness. The air inside was thick and damp, clinging to their skin like a cold sweat. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, echoing in the confined space, and the walls glistened with moisture and creeping moss. Every step forward felt heavier, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. The dog remained outside with Emily, his eyes fixed on the tunnel entrance, ears pricked and body tense as if standing guard. Martinez led the way, his flashlight sweeping methodically from side to side. Behind him, the chief and two other officers moved in a tight formation, their boots splashing softly in the shallow pools of water that had collected on the uneven floor. The tunnel stretched ahead, curving slightly, swallowing the light as quickly as it was cast. "Reed," the chief called out, his voice bouncing off the walls in eerie repetition. "If you can hear me, respond." Silence. Only the drip, drip, drip of water answered. They pressed on deeper into the tunnel, the sense of claustrophobia growing with each step. Then, from somewhere ahead came a sound, a faint shuffling, followed by a low, pained groan. The officers froze. Martinez raised a hand, signaling the others to stay alert. "Reed," he called softly. "Is that you?" The groaning grew louder, more desperate, and then a voice, hoarse and broken, echoed back. "Help, please. Someone help." The team rushed forward, rounding the curve of the tunnel, and their flashlights landed on a figure slumped against the wall. It was a man, not Reed, dressed in torn, filthy clothes, his face pale and streaked with dirt and sweat. His left leg was wrapped crudely with a blood-stained cloth, and his hands trembled as he shielded his eyes from the sudden light. The chief knelt beside him immediately, his tone sharp but not unkind. "Who are you? What happened?" The man gasped for breath, his words tumbling out in a frantic, broken rush. "Officer Reed, he saved me. I was hurt. Trapped under debris, he pulled me out, carried me." His voice cracked, and tears streamed down his face. "But when things got worse, when I heard the walls shifting, I panicked, I ran." He covered his face with his hands, sobbing. I left him behind. I'm so sorry." The officers exchanged glances, the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't what they expected. Reed wasn't the victim. He was the hero. Martinez gently gripped the man's shoulder. "Where is Reed now? Can you tell us where you left him?" The man shook his head, still crying. "Deeper further in. There was a collapse. I don't know if he made it out." The chief stood, his expression hardening. "Get this man outside. Get him medical attention. And someone radio for structural engineers. If there's been a collapse, we need to know how unstable this place is." Two officers carefully lifted the injured man, supporting him as they began the slow journey back toward the entrance. The chief turned to Martinez. "We keep going. Reed's still down here." Martinez nodded, his jaw set. "He didn't leave this guy behind. We're not leaving him." As they moved deeper into the tunnel, the walls seemed to close in tighter. The air grew thinner, harder to breathe, and the sound of dripping water was joined by the occasional groan of shifting metal and concrete. Then they saw it, a section of the tunnel where the ceiling had partially caved in. Rubble and broken support beams blocked most of the passage, leaving only a narrow gap near the floor. The chief crouched, shining his light through the gap. On the other side, the tunnel continued, but it was impossible to tell how far or what lay beyond. "Reed," he shouted through the opening.
"Can you hear me?"
For a long agonizing moment, there was nothing. Then, faint and distant, a voice replied. "Herr, I'm here." Relief and urgency surged through the team. Martinez dropped to his stomach, peering through the gap. "Reed, are you hurt?" A pause then, legs pinned, "Can't move, hurry." The chief grabbed his radio. "We need rescue equipment down here now. Officer trapped beyond a collapse. I repeat, officer trapped and injured." As the team worked to stabilize the area and prepare for extraction, the truth of what had happened became painfully clear. Reed had risked everything to save a stranger. He'd carried an injured man through dangerous tunnels, and when that man fled in fear, Reed was left behind alone and trapped. This wasn't a case of an officer in trouble. This was the story of a man who refused to abandon someone, even when it cost him everything. And now, it was their turn to bring him home. While the rescue team worked frantically to reach Reed, back at the station, another discovery was unfolding that would shake the entire investigation to its core. Officer Linda Choi, the department's communications specialist, sat hunched over her desk, replaying the archived radio logs from the past 72 hours. She'd been tasked with reviewing all transmissions to see if Reed had tried to call for backup before he disappeared. For the first hour, she found nothing out of the ordinary: routine check-ins, dispatch calls, weather updates. But then, as she scrolled through the timestamps, something caught her eye. There was a gap, a clean, deliberate gap in the log entries. At 9:47 p.m. on the night Reed went missing, there should have been a transmission. The system automatically logged every open channel, every keyed microphone, every burst of static, but between 90:47 and 90:52, there was nothing. Not even dead air. Just absence. Choi frowned, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she dug deeper into the system's backup files. Every radio transmission was supposed to be stored in duplicate, archived on a secondary server in case of technical failure. She accessed the backup, the same 5-minute gap, but this time there was metadata, a deleted file marker. Her heart began to race. She pulled up the file recovery tools and initiated a deep scan. Minutes passed, each one stretching longer than the last. Then, with a soft ping, the system flagged a recoverable fragment. Choi held her breath and clicked. The audio was scratchy, distorted, but unmistakable. Reed's voice crackled through her headset, tense and breathless. "Dispatch. This is Unit 12. I'm at the old bridge on Route 9. I've got an injured civilian, possible head trauma. He's not making sense. It says someone was chasing him." A burst of static, then Reed's voice again, quieter, strained. "Wait, I see. There's someone else here. I'm going to need backup. Sending my location now. Do not approach without." The transmission cut off abruptly. Choi's hands trembled as she replayed it. Reed had called for help. He'd tried to send his location. But the message never reached dispatch. Someone had deleted it. This wasn't a technical glitch. This was deliberate. She grabbed her phone and called the chief directly. "Sir, you need to hear this." Reed's last radio message was deleted from the system. Someone didn't want us to know where he was. There was a heavy pause on the other end. "Are you certain?" the chief asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Positive," Choi replied. "The metadata shows the file was manually removed within an hour of transmission." This wasn't an accident. This was an inside job. The chief's response was immediate and sharp. "Lock down that evidence. I want a full audit of everyone who had access to the communications system that night. No one talks about this outside the room." As the call ended, Choi sat back in her chair, her mind racing. If someone inside the department had deleted Reed's message, that meant he wasn't just in danger from whatever was in those tunnels. He was in danger from someone who wore the same badge he did. The implications were staggering. Why would someone want Reed to disappear? Was he getting too close to something? Had he seen something he wasn't supposed to? Or was this about the man he'd tried to save? Back at the tunnel site, Martinez received the update over his radio. His face went pale as he listened. then darkened with anger. He turned to the chief, who had just arrived back on the surface to coordinate the rescue. "This changes everything," Martinez said quietly. "If someone inside wanted Reed gone, we might not be the only ones looking for him." The chief's jaw tightened. "Double the perimeter security. No one gets near this site without clearance. And keep this quiet. If there's a leak, I want to know who it is before they know we know." As the team prepared to breach the collapsed section of the tunnel, a new tension settled over the scene. This was no longer just a rescue. It was an investigation into betrayal, into corruption, into the darkest kind of conspiracy. Reed wasn't just trapped by rubble and circumstance. He was trapped by someone who wanted him silenced. And time was running out to find out why. The rescue operation had been underway for over an hour when one of the officers conducting a perimeter sweep made a discovery that sent a chill through the entire team. Near the edge of the ravine, partially hidden beneath a tangle of dead brush and fallen branches, was a police convoy vehicle, an older model, decommissioned but still marked with faded department decals. It had been driven off the access road and concealed deliberately, its tires sunk deep into the mud. The officer, a rookie named Stevens, approached cautiously, his flashlight beam cutting through the gathering dusk. The vehicle's doors were unlocked. He opened the driver's side door first, nothing unusual, just an empty cab with a faint smell of stale coffee and old leather. But when he moved to the trunk and popped it open, his breath caught. Inside, crumpled in a heap, was a jacket, a blood-stained police jacket. Stevens keyed his radio immediately, his voice tight. "Chief, you need to see this, now." Within minutes, the chief and Martinez arrived, their boots crunching over frozen ground as they approached the vehicle. Stevens stepped aside, and the chief peered into the trunk. The jacket lay there, its dark fabric soaked with dried blood, the silver badge still pinned to the chest. The name stitched above the pocket was unmistakable RED. Martinez reached for the jacket carefully, lifting it out with gloved hands. The blood had dried into stiff, dark patches, concentrated around the torso and left sleeve. There was too much of it, far too much. The chief's face went grim. "Get forensics out here immediately, and someone find out who drove this vehicle last." The team moved quickly, but a heavy silence had settled over them. The unspoken thought hung in the air like smoke. If Reed had lost this much blood, the chances of finding him alive had just plummeted. Emily, who had been waiting nearby with the dog, saw the officers gathering around the vehicle. She walked over slowly, the dog padding beside her, his ears perked with interest. When she got close enough to see the jacket, her face went pale. "As that?" Martinez nodded gently. "It's Reed's." The dog stepped forward, nose twitching. He approached the jacket cautiously, sniffed once, then twice. And then he did something no one expected. He stepped back sharply, almost as if he'd been startled. His ears flattened, and he let out a low, confused whine. He didn't bark, he didn't lunge. He just retreated. Emily frowned, kneeling beside him. "What's wrong, boy? That's Reed's jacket. You know his scent." But the dog wouldn't go near it again. He circled once, keeping his distance, then sat down and stared at the jacket with an expression that almost looked like doubt. Martinez noticed immediately. "That's not normal behavior," he said quietly. "A trained dog should recognize his handler's scent, especially from something as personal as a jacket." The chief's eyes narrowed. "Unless the scent on that jacket isn't just Reed's." A forensic technician arrived within the hour, carefully bagging the jacket and taking samples of the blood for immediate analysis. The team waited in tense silence as the preliminary field test was conducted. The technician looked up, his expression puzzled. "This blood, it's not a match for Officer Reed's type." Everyone froze. "What?" the chief demanded. The technician double-checked his results, then nodded. "The blood on this jacket is type A positive. According to Reed's personnel file, he's O negative." A wave of confusion and relief swept through the group. Martinez let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Then whose blood is it?" The answer came almost immediately. The injured man they'd pulled from the tunnel earlier had been taken to the local clinic. A quick call confirmed his blood type A positive. The pieces began to fall into place. Reed hadn't been wearing the jacket when he was injured. He'd used it to save someone else. The forensic tech examined the jacket more closely under a portable light. "There are pressure marks here," consistent with using the fabric to apply direct pressure to a wound. And look, these tears aren't from damage. They're deliberate. Someone ripped this jacket to make bandages. Emily looked down at the dog, realization dawning on her face. He knew, she whispered. The dog knew the blood wasn't Reed's. That's why he stepped back. The chief turned to face the team, his voice steady but charged with renewed urgency. Reed didn't just help that man. He gave up his own jacket to stop the bleeding. That means he risked hypothermia, exposure, everything, to keep someone else alive. Martinez nodded slowly. And then he got trapped trying to get him to safety. The mood shifted. The despair that had threatened to overwhelm them moments ago was replaced by something fiercer: determination. Reed was still out there. He was hurt. He was cold. But he was alive. And he'd sacrificed everything to save a stranger. Now it was their turn to save him. The chief grabbed his radio. "All units, Reed is alive. Repeat, Officer Reed is alive. We're going back in, and we're not leaving without him." As the team regrouped and prepared for the final push into the tunnels, the dog stood at Emily's side, his eyes fixed on the darkness below. His tail gave a single, hopeful wag. He knew Reed was still down there, and they were going to bring him home. The forensic team worked with quiet intensity under portable floodlights that cast harsh shadows across the scene. The blood-stained jacket lay spread out on a sterile tarp, every fiber and stain being photographed, measured, and analyzed. Back at the station, Officer Choi coordinated with the lab, pushing for expedited results. The entire department had shifted into high gear, every resource focused on piecing together what had really happened in those tunnels. Within 2 hours, the full forensic report came through, transmitted directly to the chief's tablet as he stood outside the tunnel entrance. He read it twice, his expression shifting from concentration to something deeper, respect, maybe even awe. He called the team together, his voice cutting through the cold night air. "Listen up. Forensics just confirmed what we suspected. The blood on Reed's jacket is not his. It belongs to the civilian he rescued. But there's more." He scrolled through the report, his jaw tight. The pattern of bloodstains indicates that Reed used his jacket as a tourniquet and pressure bandage. The tears in the fabric were made deliberately, likely with a knife or sharp rock, to create strips for binding. The amount of blood suggests the victim was suffering from severe arterial bleeding, probably from a leg wound. Martinez let out a low whistle. He improvised field trauma care. Without that jacket, the guy would have bled out in minutes. The chief nodded. "And look at this." He held up the tablet, showing a close-up image of the jacket's inner lining. There are dirt smears and abrasion marks consistent with dragging. Reed wasn't just treating him. He was pulling him through the tunnel while keeping pressure on the wound. One of the younger officers shook his head in disbelief. "How is that even possible? The tunnels are barely wide enough to walk through, let alone drag someone." "It's possible," Martinez said quietly, "if you care more about the other person's life than your own." The forensic report continued with more details. Trace evidence from the jacket included soil samples matching the area near the tunnel entrance, fibers from the civilian's clothing, and, most tellingly, Reed's own DNA from sweat and skin cells, but no blood. Reed wasn't injured when he used the jacket, the chief said. He made a choice. He knew stripping off his outer layer in freezing temperatures could be fatal. But he did it anyway because that man's life depended on it. Emily, who had been listening from the edge of the group, stepped forward. "So Reed is trapped down there without his jacket." The chief's expression darkened. "Yes, which means he's been exposed to near freezing temperatures for over 48 hours. Hypothermia, dehydration, possible injuries from the collapse. Every minute counts." The dog, sensing the renewed urgency, stood and moved toward the tunnel entrance, his body taut with anticipation. He barked once, sharp and commanding, as if to say, "Stop talking. Start moving." The forensic tech added one final piece of information. "There's something else. We found trace amounts of diesel fuel and concrete dust on the jacket. The diesel suggests recent construction or demolition activity nearby. The concrete dust matches the composition of the old bridge supports, specifically the sections that were marked for reinforcement last year but never completed." The chief's eyes narrowed. So Reed wasn't just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was in a structurally compromised area that someone should have secured months ago. Martinez nodded. And whoever deleted his radio message knew he'd be down there. This wasn't just negligence. This was calculated. The pieces were coming together, forming a picture that was both heroic and horrifying. Reed had risked his life to save a stranger, using his own jacket to stop the bleeding, and then dragging the man through unstable tunnels. And when things got worse, when the walls began to collapse, the civilian had panicked and fled, leaving Reed trapped alone in the dark. But Reed hadn't called out for himself. Even in his last radio message, he'd been focused on the civilian, on getting him help. That was the kind of officer Reed was. The kind who put others first, no matter the cost. The chief closed the tablet and looked at his team. Reed gave everything to save that man. Now we owe him the same. Gear up. We're going back in, and this time we're bringing him out. As the team prepared for the final rescue push, the forensic truth settled over them like a mantle. This wasn't just about finding a missing officer anymore. It was about honoring a sacrifice, repaying a debt, and proving that no one who wore the badge would ever be left behind. The dog led the way, his nose to the ground, his body a living compass pointed straight toward the man who had once been his partner, his friend and his hero. And deep in the cold darkness of the tunnel, Officer Reed waited, unaware that an entire team and one loyal dog were coming to bring him home. The final push into the tunnel was methodical and tense. The rescue team had brought in portable jacks and reinforcement beams to stabilize the collapsed section, working with painstaking care to avoid triggering another cave-in. Every movement was calculated, every breath measured. The air inside was thick and cold, each exhale forming clouds that hung in the beam of their flashlights. Martinez led the entry team, crawling through the narrow gap they'd managed to widen in the rubble. Behind him, two paramedics squeezed through, carrying medical kits and a collapsible stretcher. The chief stayed on the other side, coordinating with the structural engineers and keeping the communication line open. "Reed," Martinez called out as he emerged into the space beyond the collapse. "Reed, can you hear me?" For a moment, there was only the drip of water and the groan of shifting metal. Then, faint and hoarse, a voice replied, "Hera, I'm here." Martinez's flashlight swept the darkness until it landed on a figure slumped against the far wall, half buried in debris. Reed's face was pale, streaked with dirt and dried blood, his eyes barely open. His left leg was pinned beneath a fallen support beam, and his hands, raw and torn, rested limply at his sides. But he was breathing. He was conscious. He was alive. "Reed," Martinez breathed, relief flooding his voice. "We've got you. Just hold on." The paramedics moved quickly, assessing Reed's condition. His pulse was weak but steady. His body temperature was dangerously low, his lips tinged blue from cold. But there were no signs of major bleeding, no immediate life-threatening injuries beyond the trapped leg and severe exhaustion. "We need to lift this beam," one of the paramedics said urgently. "But we have to do it slow. If we shift it wrong, we could crush the leg completely." Martinez nodded, calling back through the gap. "We need the hydraulic jack and more hands. Reed's pinned, but he's stable." Within minutes, additional equipment was passed through, and the team worked in coordinated silence. The hydraulic jack was positioned carefully beneath the beam, and with agonizing slowness, they began to lift. Reed let out a sharp gasp of pain as pressure shifted on his leg, but he bit down hard, his jaw clenched. "Almost there," Martinez said softly, gripping Reed's shoulder. "Just a little more." With a final groan of metal, the beam lifted enough for the paramedics to pull Reed free. His leg was swollen and bruised, but miraculously, there was no bone breaking through the skin. They wrapped it quickly in a stabilization splint and began checking his vitals more thoroughly. "Reed," Martinez said, leaning close. "The guy you saved, he's okay. He's at the clinic. He told us what you did." Reed's eyes focused slowly, and the faintest hint of a smile touched his cracked lips. "He made it. Because of you," Martinez confirmed. "You saved his life." Reed's head fell back against the wall, and he let out a long, shaky breath. "Good," he whispered. "That's good." The paramedics wrapped Reed in thermal blankets and prepared to move him onto the stretcher. As they carefully maneuvered him through the narrow tunnel, the team on the other side waited in tense silence. When Reed finally emerged into the open air, a cheer went up from the assembled officers. Flashlights waved, radios crackled with the news, and someone shouted, "He's out." Reed's out. But the loudest sound of all came from the dog. The moment he saw Reed being carried up the slope, he let out a cry, a long, piercing howl that echoed through the ravine. It wasn't a bark of excitement or a yelp of joy. It was something deeper, something primal. It was relief. It was recognition. It was reunion. Emily released the leash, and the dog bolted forward, nearly knocking over 2 officers in his rush to reach Reed. He skidded to a stop beside the stretcher, his entire body trembling. Reed's eyes, barely open, turned toward the sound. His hand, scraped and bloodied, lifted weakly. "Hey, boy," he rasped, his voice breaking. The dog pressed his nose gently against Reed's hand, then his face, his tail wagging so hard his entire body shook. He whimpered softly, licking Reed's fingers, his eyes locked on his old partner's face as if to say, "I found you. I didn't give up." Reed's fingers curled weakly around the dog's collar, holding on as if it were a lifeline. "Good boy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Good boy." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she watched. The paramedics paused, giving the 2 a moment, understanding that this reunion was as vital to Reed's recovery as any medical treatment. Martinez knelt beside the stretcher, his own eyes damp. "He's the reason we found you, Reed. He led us every step of the way." Reed's gaze shifted to the dog, and for the first time in days, something like peace settled over his exhausted features. "Knew you would," he whispered. The dog lay down beside the stretcher, refusing to move even as the paramedics prepared to load Reed into the ambulance. It wasn't until Emily gently coaxed him that he stepped back, but even then, his eyes never left Reed. As the ambulance doors closed and the vehicle pulled away, sirens wailing into the night, the dog sat at the edge of the road, watching until the red lights disappeared into the distance. The team stood in silence, the weight of the past days settling over them. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a testament to loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a man and the dog who refused to let him be forgotten. 3 days later, the hospital room was filled with soft afternoon light filtering through half-drawn blinds. Reed lay propped up in bed, his leg elevated in a cast, IV lines trailing from his arm. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and flowers, bouquets from the department, the mayor's office, and dozens of grateful citizens lined the windowsill and bedside table. But Reed's attention wasn't on any of that. It was on the door, where Emily stood nervously, the dog sitting obediently at her side. "Come in," Reed said, his voice still rough but stronger than it had been. Emily stepped forward, and the dog's ears perked up instantly. His tail began to wag, slowly at first, then faster. He looked up at Emily, then back at Reed, as if asking permission. "Go ahead," Emily whispered, unclipping the leash. The dog didn't run this time. He walked, slow and deliberate, across the room to Reed's bedside. He sat down, his head level with Reed's hand, and waited. Reed reached out, his fingers trembling slightly, and rested his hand on the dog's head. The dog leaned into the touch, his eyes closing, a soft sigh escaping him. For a long moment neither moved. Then Reed spoke, his voice breaking. "If you hadn't come, if you hadn't found me." He stopped, swallowing hard. "I wouldn't be here." Emily wiped her eyes, nodding. "He knew. From the moment I showed him the badge piece, he knew you needed him." Reed looked down at the dog, his hand moving gently over the soft fur. "I thought about you down there," he said quietly. "In the dark when I couldn't move. When I thought maybe no one was coming, I thought about you." The dog's tail thumped softly against the floor. Martinez, who had been standing quietly in the hallway, stepped into the room. He wouldn't stop, Reed. Even when we weren't sure where to look, he knew. He pulled us straight to you. Reed's gaze shifted to Martinez, then back to the dog. He gently gripped the dog's collar, the same way he had in the ravine, and pulled him a little closer. "You're not just a partner," Reed said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're the reason I'm alive." The dog rested his head on the edge of the bed, his eyes locked on Reed's face, and let out a soft, contented sigh. Emily smiled through her tears. "I think he missed you." Reed let out a weak laugh, his own eyes glistening. "Not as much as I missed him." The chief entered the room, carrying a small box. He approached the bed and opened it, revealing a newly polished badge, Reed's badge, repaired and restored. "We found all the pieces," the chief said quietly. "Thought you'd want it back." Reed took the badge carefully, running his thumb over the engraved numbers. "Thank you," he said softly. The chief nodded, then looked down at the dog. "We're putting in a formal commendation. This dog didn't just assist in a rescue, he led it. Without him we'd still be searching." Martinez added, "And we're reopening the investigation into who deleted your radio message. Whoever tried to bury this isn't going to get away with it." Reed's expression darkened for a moment, but then he looked back at the dog, and his face softened. "One thing at a time," he said. "Right now, I just want to say thank you." He looked at Emily. "And I want to ask you something." Emily tilted her head, curious. "What is it?" Reed glanced at the dog, then back at her. "Would you let him stay with me? Officially, as my partner again?" Emily's eyes widened, and a smile broke across her face. "I think that's exactly what he wants." The dog's tail wagged furiously, and he let out a single, joyful bark. Reed laughed, the sound weak but genuine. Then it settled. As the room filled with quiet laughter and relieved conversation, the dog rested his head on Reed's hand, his eyes half closed in contentment. The bond between them, forged years ago and tested in the darkest of circumstances, had proven unbreakable. Reed had risked everything to save a stranger, and the dog had done the same to save him. In the end, it wasn't just about duty or training. It was about love, loyalty, and the quiet, powerful truth that some connections can never be lost. As the afternoon sun streamed through the window, casting warm light over the room, Reed closed his eyes and whispered one last time, "Thank you, boy. Thank you." And the dog, understanding in the way only a dog can, simply stayed. Because that's what partners do. They stay, no matter what.